Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. Make sure to like this video and check out everything we have for you in the description below for some exclusive college football content and offers. Today, guys, we are bringing you our first game of the week during rivalry week, and it's not just any ordinary game. It is the game, as Ohio State will be traveling to Ann Arbor to take on their bitter rivals up north in Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. One of the greatest rivalries in all of college football, and we are set up for what should be another classic in this very, very historic rivalry. But a little bit of backstory will show, a little bit of history will show that this rivalry has not been that competitive over the past decade. Michigan has lost 14 of the past 15 games to the Buckeyes, the lone win coming all the way back in 2011. So since then, Ohio State has won 7 straight over the Wolverines, including 4 by at least 2 possessions. And that includes last year's 62-39 home victory for Ohio State, one where Michigan was actually favored in a loss that ruined Michigan's college football playoff hopes. So while this game is not nearly as big as last year's game, while maybe it's not nearly as big as the one in 2016 that went to overtime between the number 2 and number 3 teams in the country, this matchup now in 2019 between Ohio State and Michigan is still huge and has major national title implications. It's huge for both teams, but maybe for different reasons. When we mention the national title implications, that of course refers to Ohio State. They're a top 4 team in the country right now, and they need a win here over a solid Michigan team on the road. If they lose this game, their playoff hopes are not over, but they do take a major hit. For Michigan, we know they can't make the playoff. We know they can't even make the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State has already clinched the East. But this game is huge to not just end that 7-game losing streak, but to also give Jim Harbaugh his first victory over Ohio State since he arrived in Ann Arbor. He has yet to beat Ohio State, and we all know, for Michigan fans, you have to do that. If you can't do that, your stay in Ann Arbor may be very short-lived. Harbaugh has been criticized, has been on the hot seat at times, but maybe this very hot start, this very hot finish from the Wolverines might save his job regardless of what happens this Saturday in Ann Arbor. So we're going to preview the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and then of course, who's going to win this game and why. But let's start with the offense here, and we'll start with Ohio State. You have to start with the road team right now, and Ohio State having one of the best offenses in the entire country, averaging 49.4 points per game, behind one of the best duos in all of college football. One of the best duos in all of college football, quarterback Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins at running back. Fields has over 2,300 yards through the air, 33 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. He has also added 10 touchdowns on the ground. So you add that all together, that's 43 total touchdowns to just 1 interception. J.K. Dobbins, on the other hand, he has rushed for nearly 1,500 yards this season. Will probably eclipse that mark in this game against Michigan. He's averaging 6.6 yards per carry, and listen to these numbers. J.K. Dobbins seems to show up for the big games. He seems to show up against elite defenses and against elite opponents. Rushed for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns last week against Penn State. Rushed for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns versus Wisconsin. And he rushed for 172 yards and a touchdown against Michigan State. All of which have fairly solid defenses. And Michigan State, of course, we're grouping them together with Wisconsin and Penn State, at the time was an elite opponent. All these teams, very solid opponents. And J.K. Dobbins shows up and shows out against these teams. Can the same be said this Saturday when he travels on the road to face off against Michigan? Ohio State, with that dynamic duo, has one of the most balanced offenses in the entire country, which is a nightmare for any opposing defense because if you take away J.K. Dobbins, Justin Fields will just pick up that slack. If you take away the passing game with Justin Fields, they're going to rely on J.K. Dobbins, who, as we've seen, can single-handedly defeat you. They're averaging nearly 250 passing yards per game and 282 rushing yards per game. So Michigan's going to have their hands full on the defensive side of the ball. But Michigan's offense, let's talk about them for a second. They have found new life, and they have finally found their identity on the offensive side of the ball. For the first half of the season, Michigan was strongly criticized for not having an offense, and they didn't. They were unable to put up the points. The passing game was struggling. They could not get anything going. They were nearly defeated at home by Army. They got annihilated by Wisconsin. Michigan did not look like a top 25 team. And we'll add to that, Michigan looked like they were going to get annihilated by Ohio State when this game rolled around the end of the season. But something, as we've said multiple times, something clicked in the second half of that loss at Penn State. Something clicked. Michigan over the season is averaging 33.5 points per game, but since that Penn State loss, they're averaging 41.5 points per game. That's over 4 games, over the past 4. They have a fairly balanced offense. Shea Patterson, of course, leading that offense, 247.5 passing yards per game and 155.1 rushing yards per game, so balanced, but not nearly as balanced as Ohio State. But the biggest thing that has impressed me from Michigan on the offensive side of the ball has not been the amount of points that they're putting up. It's not been the margin of victory. It's been the play from Shea Patterson. Listen to this. On the year, Shea Patterson has 2,523 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. In the past 4 games, he has thrown for 1,001 yards and 11 touchdowns. To break that down, the 1,001 yards, that's 40% of the yards he has thrown for this season have come in the past 4 games. The 11 touchdowns, that's 52% of the touchdowns he has thrown all season. Those marks coming in just the past 4 games, guys. It's unbelievable the change that we have seen on the offensive side of the ball for Michigan. The question is, can they keep it up against one of the best defenses in the entire country, with, of course, Ohio State, led by arguably the best football player in the entire nation, in Chase Young, who has 16.5 sacks and 7 forced fumbles this season. Once again, one of the best players in the entire nation. The Ohio State defense is allowing just 10.5 points per game. That's it. That is it. Less than 2 touchdowns per game that the Buckeyes are allowing. And they're allowing just 217.4 yards per game. That's not passing yards. That's not rushing yards. That's total yards. That's 91.2 rushing yards per game allowed and 126.2 passing yards per game allowed. So this defense, one of the best in the entire country. So despite what Michigan is doing offensively, they're going to have to keep it up and maybe then some if they want to beat Ohio State at home. Now for Michigan, they still have a solid defense as well. And we've known that under Jim Harbaugh, their strength has always been their defense. They've had decent offenses, mediocre at times, sometimes below average. But most of the time what has kept Michigan elite, what has kept Michigan in their games, has been the strength and the leadership of their defense. And this year they're allowing just 16.2 points per game. But the big numbers that I want to circle here are the 105.9 rushing yards per game allowed. Not a bad mark, but still well over 100 that could really benefit J.K. Dobbins here. And the other thing that I want to look at is the forced turnovers from Michigan. So while the 105, nearly 106 rushing yards per game is a negative, the positive is that Michigan has forced 7 turnovers in those past 4 games that we mentioned. They have forced 7 turnovers, and that could be very beneficial against an Ohio State team that, as of late, has kind of struggled to hold on to the football. And Michigan's going to need all the help they can get, all the chances they can get in this game if they want to beat Ohio State. They're going to need to force as many turnovers as possible and then capitalize off of them if they want to win. So there's your offense, there's your defense. Obviously, on paper, Ohio State owns the edge on both sides of the football. That's just plain and simple. That's number-wise they do and talent-wise they do. But what are the keys for the game here? For Michigan, we mentioned that Ohio State looks better on paper. Yes, they do, but Michigan, if they can stay hot, they can win this game. So the key for Michigan is to stay hot. Don't take your foot off the gas. Now, that's easier said than done. Ohio State is the best defense that Michigan has faced within these past 4 games since Michigan has really started clicking offensively. So stay hot. Continue to utilize Shea Patterson. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Shea Patterson is thriving in the passing game, so don't try to go run heavy and try to pound it against Ohio State's run defense. That's one of the best in the country. Continue to use Shea Patterson. Utilize the tight ends. Watch Penn State in the film from last week. Penn State utilized their tight ends. They utilize the middle of the field. And if Michigan can do that, they can very well hang in this game with Ohio State. They don't have to hit the home run ball every time. They don't have to go deep. They don't have to have the most explosive play. They just need to march down the field and get points. And then finally for Michigan, their biggest key, more than anything, slow down the offense, more so J.K. Dobbins than Justin Fields. So slow down J.K. Dobbins and force Justin Fields to try to win this game solely through the air. And then protect Shea Patterson by stopping that ferocious passing defense and pass rush from Ohio State, namely Chase Young, who had 3 sacks last weekend against Penn State. You have to contain Chase Young. If you can't, you're not going to win. Wisconsin couldn't do it. They got blown out. Penn State couldn't do it. They lost by 11. So if Michigan cannot contain Chase Young and they allow him to wreak havoc in the backfield, it's already over. For Ohio State, one of the biggest keys for them, and I think something that not a lot of people are talking about, is this is Justin Fields' first year as a full-time starter at any school. Obviously, his first year as full-time starter at Ohio State. This is his first matchup against Michigan. And it's coming on the road at the Big House versus a top 4 team in Ohio State and what should be a top 10 team in Michigan. It's over 100,000 people screaming at you, wanting their defense to annihilate you every single play. This is the toughest environment that Justin Fields has faced in his very young career with the Buckeyes. So do not allow Justin Fields, and Justin Fields, do not get rattled. Keep your composure. You've been one of the best quarterbacks in the country all season long. That should not change now, despite the environment. But if Michigan can rattle them a little bit, the defense can get going early on. If the crowd continues to stay into it because it's a close game, you could see some errors, some delay of games, and some bad plays from Justin Fields just because he's not used to this type of environment. Secondly, for Ohio State, utilize the drives, man. Utilize the time of possession. Take some long drives and take care of the football. Michigan is not a team that tends to score very fast. Ohio State can. So if Ohio State can maybe draw out these drives and not allow Michigan to have much time with the football, it's going to really benefit this Ohio State team as a whole. Take care of the football was our second point, and that's because Ohio State had 3 turnovers versus Penn State and 2 turnovers versus Rutgers. So that's 5 turnovers in their past 2 games. They've got to be very, very careful in an environment like this and in a game like this. Every possession counts. Every second counts. So Ohio State needs to take care of the football and not make any unforced errors. Biggest key for them by far. So who's going to win this game? Who's going to win the game on Saturday morning, 11 o'clock Central Time? One that has major stakes for both teams, major implications for both teams. I am here to say that I believe Ohio State wins this game. I think a lot of people want to pick Michigan, and some have picked Michigan as the trendy upset pick that maybe could throw the playoff into chaos. But I just don't think it's going to happen. This game will be closer than the 62-39 beatdown that Michigan received last year. I do expect it to be much closer than that. I'll actually be shocked if Ohio State wins this game by more than 2 touchdowns. I actually see this game being a somewhat defensive struggle early on. I see it very low scoring, teams struggling to find their groove offensively, struggling to put up some points early on. But as Ohio State has done every time they've had a slow start this season, they will end up pulling away and defeating Michigan at the Big House for the 8th straight victory over their bitter rival in the Wolverines. And they will just be 1 win away over either Wisconsin or Minnesota in the Big Ten Championship from going to the College Football Playoff and Ryan Day's first season as head coach. I said before, Ohio State is the most complete team in the country, and in a close game like this against Michigan, you will definitely see that. So guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to check out everything we have in the description below for some exclusive college football content and offers. And once again, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.